Welcome to the Good for America podcast. I'm your host, former Congressman Bob Good, former chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. And as always, we want to ask you to subscribe to the podcast, follow me on social media at Rep Bob Good, rate the show, and refer it to your friends. I'm very excited today for us to have a friend of mine on the podcast, to have one of the true courageous conservative warriors from Washington, the great Clay Higgins from Louisiana on the podcast today. Welcome to the podcast, Clay. Good to have you.
Thank you, Bob. It's great to join you. It's wonderful to see you. I look forward to our conversation today.
Well, by way of introduction, with Clay Higgins, again, Congressman from Louisiana. He's been in the House he's in his fifth term, got first elected in 2016, began to serve in 2017. He is a member of the House Freedom Caucus, but not just a member. He's on the board of directors, on the leadership team. I had the privilege of serving with him in that capacity my last year in D.C. He also serves on the Homeland Security Committee, the Armed Services Committee, and the Oversight Committee. And again, he is what I call a courageous conservative warrior. He's a tiger in terms of he's a graduate of Louisiana State, LSU. But Clay, I don't know, does anybody call you the Raging Cajun, since you do have the Cajun area of Louisiana?
Yeah, it depends. You know, people know me as a Cajun, but I have no French blood in me. I'm of Irish descent, and I proudly represent the people of Acadiana and call this my home for a very long time. But it's funny how our heritage sort of defines itself according to our journey in life, and that. So I'm honored to be a raging Cajun by nature of my service to the people of South Louisiana. However, I don't speak French.
But you do have Louisiana, or what used to be called Louisiana Lafayette, Raging
Yeah,
Cajuns
I
are in your
live in
district, right?
Lafayette. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have been there, and they've got a great football program as well. We're not really here to talk football, but we're on the cusp of football season. The first thing I did want to talk to you about, though, we covered this pretty extensively in one of our recent podcasts a week or two ago, right after it happened. But I described it as, once again, another example of what is wrong in Washington, or more specifically, sadly, what's wrong with the Republican Party. And we talked about the recent decision by the party replacing the former chairman of Homeland Security, Mark Green, and how the leading candidate should have been none other than our guest today, none other than you yourself, Clay Higgins from Louisiana. You were next in line in terms of seniority on the Homeland Security Committee. You're a highly qualified, true conservative. You were seeking the position, as I understood it, based on experience. You're former military, former law enforcement. And I will point out, as the only member of the House task force on the attempted assassination of President Trump, you were, in my view, the only one who really did anything on that task force. You released your own findings very quickly. You did your own thorough investigation on that. You were a leader in the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas, the effort to impeach him. And, you know, with respect to Homeland Security, what the party did instead was to choose the liberal, I won't even say moderate, the liberal Andrew Garbarino from New York. He's only been in the House since 21. You've got him 4 years of seniority. Again, you've been on the committee longer. You've got the military law enforcement background. He does not have anything like that. You're in the Freedom Caucus, so we know where you come from in the House conference. I use scorecards sometimes to assess and compare. And if you take the four scorecards that rate the voting records of members of Congress, Heritage Action, Club for Growth, Conservative Review, and ILA, or Institute for Legislative Analysis, your average score is an 89, his is a 58. And I could go through also, which I won't do, but a dozen or so really bad votes, really prominent examples of how liberal he is. But yet, the party chose him over you. And I say the party, not the members of the committee. The party chose him over you. If you would just give us your thoughts on that, what that says about the party in general or leadership in general. And being from Louisiana, did you get an explanation for that from the speaker, who's Speaker Johnson from Louisiana, or the leader Scalise from Louisiana. What does it say about the party, and how did they try to defend this, or did they to you?
Well, Bob, I have to say that it was quite a blow to me and my family. Um, we we're still dealing with with the the feelings of betrayal, and it was more than just like a time for a new Congress when all these guys are competing for a chair of this and chair of that, and as you know, DC is infested with people that are obsessed with themselves, and they're making the next step politically, and
Right.
how they can gain some greater favor and earn more money, and like set themselves up for post Congress better and raise more campaign funds. And I don't know. I'm just not one of those guys, and I don't even trust those guys. I don't like those guys, and I don't consider myself amongst their number. Now I'll work with them because I'm a diplomat, and I have a mission to perform on behalf of the American people. So that mission, the theater of engagement for that mission, is in Washington D.C., which means I have to do business with these people, but I don't have to like them, and I don't have to trust them. And I am, you know me pretty good. I have a certain naivete that I believe in the goodness of man, and I placed a great deal of faith in my colleagues that they would do the right thing in that secret room. I was on that committee for 9 years. I mean, the Homeland Security Committee, pretty much I built it, man, with a handful of others, yes, but nobody has put more energy and service into the Homeland Security Committee than me. And my entire life had prepared me to chair Homeland. I did not seek the chair. The chair opened in front of me. Like, I didn't alter my journey in service to we the people in order to ascend to some chair. I didn't shift my position because I thought that being the chairman of Homeland would be better for my political career. I don't operate like that. So the chair opened on my illuminated path in front of me when my friend Chairman Mark Green decided to leave Congress. And I responded to that moment in history where my country needed me to be the chairman. But clearly, enough of my colleagues in that secret room with the secret ballot and the secret system of the steering committee, they aligned themselves against everything I have stood for in my entire life of service. America needs boots on the ground, and they chose penny loafers. So we're going to have to deal with those repercussions. I can tell you things are not the same. I don't feel the same. The Homeland Security Committee, in a very important relationship with Article 1 authority, to work with Article 2 and the President's team, and to design policy that will withstand the scrutiny of Article 3 and advance the conservative agenda and the America First agenda. So the Homeland Security Committee was not like, the Education Committee or the Small Business Committee or something, man. It's Homeland Security. You needed a guy like me running that committee. It didn't happen. So I have to recover from that injury. But it was an injury to me and my family, and I believe it was an injury to the country. And you don't have to look any further than the men and women that were in that room that made that decision. And because who else was there? They're the steering committee. It's all Republicans. You can't blame Democrats. So I don't know, man. I have some personal lingering feelings of injury that I am attempting as a man and as a Christian to just get beyond. Well, I'm not quite there yet, if you can tell.
Well, I'm grateful for your candid response to this, and I'm going to stay on this for a few moments more because it is an egregious injustice, not just to you personally. Now, we don't deserve anything as individuals. We know that by the grace of God. If we've got salvation and heaven secure, the rest is just a blessing. But it's an egregious injustice to the country. When you break down, and you kind of touched on it here, what is the appropriate role of the federal government or the primary responsibility of the federal government? It's safety and security. It's defending the homeland. It's defending from foreign invasion. It's protecting the citizenry, protecting our constitutional freedoms, but also protecting us from foreigners who would harm us. And that's where your experience is in law enforcement and in military. You serve on arguably the two committees that, again, are most representative of the priorities of what should be the priorities of the federal government, armed services and Homeland Security. And we've just endured, and we're still suffering the consequence of the greatest invasion in the history of the country with the 15, 20 million illegals that have been brought here by the Democrat Party under the Biden administration's time. You were on the front lines of fighting against that. And yet our party, and that's my point, it's not about Andrew Garbarino, and it's not even about Clay Higgins. And I know you wouldn't make about Clay Higgins. One thing I respect about you, you're not a grandstander, you're not a big talker, you're a powerful voice. You're one of those people that when you speak, people listen because of how effective you are, but also because you're serious, you're deliberate, you're thoughtful, you're strong, you're courageous, and you take your responsibility very seriously. But for the party system, which is broken, the swamp is broken, the deep state exists, it's dirty, and then there's the Democrats too. But with respect to the Republican Party, again, to take a liberal congressman from New York with no relevant experience and place him as the chairman of this committee. And I said I wasn't going to do it. I'm going to touch on it. He voted to certify all the electors on January 6th. Back in 21 when he first got to Congress. He voted to establish the J6 Commission, Nancy Pelosi's J6 Commission. He voted for Biden's phony infrastructure bill. Only 12 other Republicans joined him. He voted for the Gay Marriage Act, along with only 45 other Republicans. He voted against Thomas Massey's amendment eliminating Department of Education back in 23. He voted against Jim Jordan for Speaker back in October of 23. He voted against defunding the FBI headquarters back in 23. He voted to expel George Santos, who was not convicted of any crime at that point. He voted against a FISA warrant amendment and voted to reauthorize FISA without the constitutional protections that most of us thought needed to be in place. And then he slept through the big bill vote back in June. He slept through and missed that. And I'll just add one other thing, get your final thoughts on this before we move on from it, Clay, in terms of at least it applies to this discussion. I'm not going to stop talking about it because it's relevant, but for this discussion, I've often said that the way you become a committee chair in Washington on the Republican side, I can't speak for how the Democrats decide, but I have advocated that we ought to have our members of the committee choose who among them is the most competent, capable, experienced, skillful, knowledgeable, effective, what have you. But we don't do that. You get to be a committee chair by how much money you raise for the party. Number two, whether or not you obey leadership and you're a reliable team player vote. And number three, you're a moderate, ideally even a liberal, establishment rhino committed to maintaining the status quo, the uniparty status quo. So again, what does this say about the Republican Party? What does this say about Republican leadership? And how could we possibly respect a decision like this? I'll get your final thoughts on that before we change subject.
Well, it certainly sheds a poor light upon the core principles or the lack thereof of the Republican Party within that bizarre realm of D.C. And I would say that, I've checked every box, Bob, regarding
Absolutely.
how I qualified for that position, including I have always paid my NRCC dues. I'm one of the few Freedom Caucus members that always. So I'm in my fifth term of paying my dues, and I'm at what they call current.
Explain
right
what
now
that means to our listeners or viewers who don't know what that means. What are we talking about there?
Well, it means you have to raise money through this almost like enslavement system that where we're forced to raise tremendous amounts of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars in every Congress that goes into a large pool where the Republican Party funds the races of men that are less conservative than me. So, but there's a rule in that place, so I follow the rules. I'm a law enforcement guy, and I've always performed there. And let me just say that I refrain from being judgmental or personal about the decisions that my colleagues made in the steering committee that night, denying me that chair after 9 years of service. But it was insulting to me and my family and my entire life, basically, and it was injurious to the country. And the Republican conference is going to have to live with that decision. And I will close with this statement. I believe if I was not a member of the Freedom Caucus, I'd be chairman of the Homeland Security Committee today. It was a kind of blow against conservative principles, and those of us that have the audacity to fight on behalf of those principles within that infested swamp. When they can do it in secret, in a secret room with a secret ballot and a secret unspoken of vote, you'll never know who voted for who, then that's when they'll put a knife in the back of the guy that dares to be a member of the Freedom Caucus. So, okay.
Well,
I'm now a rogue free agent, brother. The whole conference is about to meet a whole new Clay Higgins.
you mean now you're going to be unleashed?
Yeah, I'm
We didn't
unleashed
know you've
now.
been holding back all this time.
Yeah, I've been holding back. I'm quite a diplomatic fellow and very respectful for my colleagues, but my conference greatly disrespected me when 2 weeks ago when they made that decision, and they hurt the country. So we'll see.
Again, I appreciate you being open about your remark. I knew you'd be honest, but in terms of sharing even more than I thought you might be willing to share, but I want to circle back to what I mentioned a few moments ago about qualifications. Again, you being on that speaker-selected House task force on the assassination attempt against President Trump that took place in Pennsylvania, to show you how serious the party is about these kind of assignments, or unserious, I should say. The party, and it's Speaker Johnson, quite frankly, passed over qualified. We were able to, we see you get placed on that task force, but they passed over qualified snipers like Corey Mills from Florida, and
Eli
our
Crane.
friend Eli Crane from Arizona, Andrew Clyde from Georgia would have been a great member of that committee. Some of the guys on judiciary, lawyers like Chip Roy and Andy Biggs and so forth. But thankfully, you were the bright light on there. But the chairman of that committee, and I'll say it, you probably wouldn't say in disparage, but he's a car salesman. He's a car salesman.
Well, he's
I
a car
didn't ask
dealer.
him. Yeah,
I mean, he's a great guy.
he's a
Bob.
business guy.
Mike Kelly is a squared away guy. It's impossible to not like this man.
But nothing qualified him to lead that committee except it happened. The crime happened in his district.
Yeah, it was his hometown, and he was there. I mean, he's the only member of Congress he was there with the president when the president was shot in his own hometown. So it was quite personal for him.
But as a typical
I
Washington,
can understand. Let me say, I think he did a pretty good job as chair under those circumstances, and then I yield to the gentleman. Go ahead with your point.
well, as typical Washington, though, still don't know anything about crooks. And you pointed out very quickly why we were going to have trouble finding out about crooks when you talked about how the crime scene was wiped clean swiftly and his body was cremated so quickly and so
Cremated
forth.
the body.
Yeah. And then secondly, nobody at Secret Service got fired. Nobody got held accountable, despite your best efforts and this great service you did, not just to your district, but the American people on that task force. And to your point on the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, it's a disservice to the country. You're the representative from Louisiana for the country, not just for your district, but obviously it's the House of Representatives to do the work of the American people. And a great disservice was done in secret. And that's just, again, people want to know why things don't change in Washington and what's wrong with the Republican Party. Look no further than that. Let me shift gears a little bit, my friend. We've just completed the first 7 months of Republicans' total control of government. We came out of the wilderness of 4 years under Biden, 2 years of full Democrat control with when they had the House and the Senate and everything. Now we've got full control of government. A lot of promises were made last term and during the campaign. And we were frustrated often, not to speak for you, but frustrated often by our party leadership saying, oh, well, we can't do this or that because we don't have the White House, we don't have the Senate. Well, now we've got it all. How would you sort of summarize or assess the first 7 months of full Republican control of government, what we've done well, what we haven't done well, what you're pleased with, what you're concerned about? Just some thoughts on the first 7 months.
Okay, well, my list of things that I'm not pleased with is much longer than my list of things that I am pleased with. But it's important to note, my brother, that the things that we did accomplish are significant. So, whereas we certainly have not performed the way I would have written that script or the way you would have controlled if we had total control, the truth is we do not. And we are the Freedom Caucus, I mean, when I say we are a powerful faction within the House of Representatives, arguably perhaps the most powerful faction. Yes. However, we're not 218 votes. So I think the Freedom Caucus did a very effective job at creating the most conservative product and performance and policy out of our first 7 months partnered with President Trump and controlling the House, the Senate, and the White House. And things would not be nearly on the trajectory where they are right now with over a 10-year score. That's the way things are
Right.
projected in Washington, D.C. regarding budgeting. We've changed slightly the trajectory of spending, which is incredibly important. We have to continue that fight. That was a good first step. We reduced a long list of these subsidies that had stacked the deck against conservative Americans and the America First policies, and was injuring our grid, and just totally unfair subsidies that were picking winners the way DC does it. We pushed back a lot on that, and we made tremendous gains with conservative execution of the America First agenda in our military and in
Yes.
Department of Homeland Security. So we have significant wins. However, we have a long way to go. Is that a fair assessment, sir?
Indeed, indeed it is, and I appreciate that. You're exactly right. There is a lot to criticize. There is a lot to be concerned about, but we must note the successes and the positives. President Trump has done a lot of great things. I don't agree with him on everything, as you know, but he's done a lot of great things, and it would be much worse if it weren't for the Freedom Caucus influencing the debate, changing the narrative, if you will, as far as, okay, not whether if we will cut spending, but how much can we get through, how much can we cut, and so forth. I want to touch on one thing specifically because it's relevant to the committee that you serve on. And again, during the last 4 years, at least, probably the worst damage done to the country, in addition to the debt, being the border invasion. We have deported about 250,000 this year. We're on track for about 500,000, about 500,000. That's the reports that I'm seeing. How do you feel about those numbers? And is that enough? Why isn't it more when we had 15, 20 million come in during the Biden administration illegally?
So once you've maxed out your capability, then you've maxed out your capability. I mean, if you have a 15 passenger van and you got 16 people in it, you're pretty much maxed out. So based upon our personnel, our infrastructure, the ability to run operations by human beings, we have a limit of just how many we can deport, how many illegals we can round up and and get them out of here. It's important to note, by the way, sort of a sidebar. We're not bringing these people to. They're not being brought to a prison. They're being brought back to their own country or a third country, and they're being released. There's a process that country deals with them, and if they have other charges, they have to navigate through that. But when American law enforcement picks up an American citizen with a warrant to take possession of that person, we're bringing them to jail. When American law enforcement picks up an illegal for deportation, we're bringing them to release them into another country.
Right.
And if they want to bring their family with them, they can. You understand? So it's important to note that all of the deportations are deportations. These men and women are not being brought to prison. They're being delivered somewhere to live free. But they're getting out of our country. We're having to bring them out of our country because they're here illegally and they're involved in criminal activity, or they're hanging out with somebody that's involved in criminal activity. So it's huge numbers that we have performed thus far with deportation. And I'd ask your opinion. What have you put into the self-deportation, which is difficult to measure? Mm-hmm. We've been encouraging that, and it is happening. Like whole illegal work crews are, they're loading up their belongings and they're heading south, man. So I would say the numbers of actual ICE operations, seizures and arrests and deportations, far lower than self-deportations.
Well, I think you make a good point there, and Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security, and the administration has been trying to promote just what you said, incentivize self-deportation with some resources, $1,000 and free travel to get back, and then the opportunity
Pretty
to apply.
Good deal, huh?
Yeah, and then the opportunity to apply to come back to the United States legally. But the problem, as I see it, as no great revelation here, is the threat within the country of the, again, 15 million plus who are here. We don't know who they are. They weren't vetted, criminal backgrounds, terrorist ties, gang members, traffic drugs and children and so forth in here. The threat that exists, number one, to our national security with who's here. Number two, while the administration has done a tremendous job, I think you would agree, and you know better than I, of shutting off the faucet, cutting off the spigot, stopping the flow, almost eliminating it. But God forbid another Democrat administration in 3.5 years, they can turn that faucet back on almost immediately. Where are we with respect, in your view, to long-lasting, more effective legislation to codify into law more long-term the effect of Trump policy so that it won't be as easy for a Democrat administration just to bring them back in as quickly as they can? Because they can bring them in faster and we can send them back, to the point that you've already made. How do you feel about the emphasis on legislation in the Republican Congress to codify these policies to long-lasting effect?
Yes, sir. Well, and let me quite frankly say that that I had a specific plan to codify sections of HR 2 that have not been included in law subsequent to the passage of HR 2, which was a hell of an accomplishment through the Homeland Security Committee, by the way. And I had a specific plan that I presented to leadership in my clarification of what my intentions for Homeland Security Committee would be if I was selected as chair for HR 2.0. And that kind of what I mentioned earlier is super important, that Article 1, through our congressional authority, performs hand in glove with the Article 2 endeavors that you're describing now through the executive branch. So if you don't codify these actions, then we'll be subject to a repeat of what we have already suffered. And let me just say that I don't know what direction the Homeland Security Committee, which would be one of the primary committees, Homeland and Judiciary, to codify the actions of when it comes to border and immigration and enforcement of our sovereignty. Then the primary committee would be Homeland. And the Republican Party has just chosen to go in another direction from the committee that I've helped build for 9 years. You know, my colleague is a friendly guy. I have nothing personal against Andrew Garbarino. I like him, but I mean, he has voted for amnesty in one iteration or another, and he's on the political spectrum. He's would be considered quite a liberal Republican, and
Yeah.
I get it that he represents a purple district, they call it, but nonetheless, you know, I'm an America First conservative Republican, and in order to codify America First conservative Republican agenda from the White House, and to protect our country, to mitigate against the kind of injury that we suffered, that the generational trauma that was brought upon our country under the 4 years of Biden, you have to have a strong Article 1 performance. And to work in unison and in coordination with the executive branch to support the agenda that protects our country. And I don't know what direction the Homeland Security Committee is going to go on now, but I can tell you that I, as a member of Congress, will continue to support strong enforcement of our laws. I oppose amnesty in any form, and the American people deserve full and vigorous enforcement of American law and a restoration of our sovereignty. So we'll see. We'll see how the
Well,
Republican Party wants to define itself, you know,
well,
between now and November 2026.
Americans could sleep better knowing you were at the helm of that committee than a New York liberal from a swing district, a moderate swing district, and yet that's who the Republican leadership, the Republican Party, not the rank and file members like yourself, but chose as a leader of this committee. And to your point, one final question, because you've been gracious with your time, but you touched on it, as the party has had some rumblings from the White House with Secretary Rollins, who some believe is in favor of some form of amnesty. President Trump has cracked the window to that. He said, "Oh, we don't want to do amnesty, but we want to do a works program. We want to treat differently those who are in our service, hospitality, hotels and restaurants, or work on farms and so forth," which would seems to me, as a guy unqualified to lead the committee that you're qualified to lead, but if you're an illegal here with nefarious intent, then just go work on a farm if you want to stay. And then you've got Maria Salazar from Florida with the bill trying to provide amnesty. Final question, final thoughts. How concerned are you that Republicans might advance what I would consider, and I suspect you would consider, an amnesty bill in this Congress between now and the end of next year?
Well, it's a significant concern, and they can expect a hell of a fight from men like me, and I mean, if the Republican Party wants to define itself by weakness, then we won't be the majority party after the election cycle in
That's
2026.
right.
I've seen this movie. You know, but if the Republican Party will define itself based upon the core principles that made our country great to begin with, and embrace the America First agenda of the Trump administration, and stand upon the strong cornerstones of strength and enforcement of our existing law, and if Republicans will embrace that spectrum of the ideological variances that the Republican Party itself represents, then we will remain in the majority. And if we on the other hand, if we shift direction to try and appease weakness and to try and strike some middle ground, that really the middle ground these days in D.C. is quite moderate leaning liberal.
That's right.
We are fighting tooth and nail to steer the policy of our country into a comfortable conservative spectrum. And some of us are unwavering in that fight, and we shall continue to be. Whether or not we win, I cannot say, my friend, but I can tell you that I'll be in that fight, and the Freedom Caucus is in that fight, and we shall see who's the last man standing.
Well, you're exactly right in your assessment, in my estimation anyway. The Democrats were in a similar position to us 4 years ago. They had the White House and very narrow majorities in the House and the Senate, and they went big and bold with their communist, radical leftist agenda. They were willing to lose, if necessary, the 22 midterms, and they did, to enact their agenda, and they used that as motivation to get done what they could when they had control. We ought to use the same thing. To your point, go big and bold on reducing government and cutting spending and dealing with our border invasion, our immigration issues, and earn the trust of the American people in 26 to give us greater majorities and greater control. Or if, God forbid, we were, as is typically happens historically in the first midterm after a change in power, if we were to suffer a loss of the majority, at least we got done what we could while we had the opportunity to do so. The Congress is better off for people like you, Clegg Higgins, in there. I'm glad you're there. I appreciate you taking the fight every day, representing your constituents with integrity and with toughness and resilience as you do. And thank you for joining us on the Good for America podcast. For our friends who are watching and listening with us, again, subscribe to the podcast. Follow me at Rep Bob Good. Refer the show to your friends and rate it for us. And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Good for America podcast.
You,
God
Bob.
bless you. Let's save the Republic.